for the 17th Annual Privacy and Security Conference for primarily the government and some corporation, and I made the statement that the weakest link in discussions of privacy is the definition of privacy. And the definition of privacy is no longer what we think it is. And the reason it's no longer what we think it is because the very self, the individual human being, who was contextualized by prior technologies, is no longer the self that we are, and certainly not the self that we have discussed enhancing, augmenting, and transforming into a different kind of human species, or at least variety, in the future. And therefore, this is very paradoxical and very tricky to talk about, because literally the language we want to use for ethics, which came from originally our religious narratives, has to be reformulated in light of who we really are and what we are really able to do and are doing now. And if we don't do that, we're using 20th century language or 19th century language, or in some cases 16th century language, or Stone Age or Bronze Age language to try to describe what is no longer really appropriate for us. So we can do a lot of things, but we should really think seriously about what it is we want to do. Here you're looking at an RFID implant, and you heard Amal. Amal can open doors, leap tall buildings at a single bound, do all sorts of things with the RFID chips that are in his hands. He was on the panel in Canada as well, but somebody else on the panel, a PhD student at University of Victoria, questioned whether or not there's this overriding purpose for implanting the RFID implants at this point. That comes out of the quantified self movement, as does, I don't have a picture of it, but Buttermind Seth Roberts. You may know about him. He thought lipids, excessive amounts of lipids, were key to an agile mind. And he's called Buttermind because he ate half a stick of butter for breakfast every day. He died of a heart attack. It might have been from eating all those lipids. It might have been from a congenital defect of his heart. I don't know, and I don't know any autopsy results. But the point is, it points to personal risk. You had better not trust the paternalistic medical system exclusively, but you had better learn to trust your own better judgment when you're evaluating these things. It is completely your right to do whatever you choose to do with your body, but you are responsible for what you do with your body and the sometimes unintended consequences. So accepting rights means accepting responsibility for making those choices. Somebody else is giving themselves infusions of vitamin A2 as opposed to vitamin A1 because they want to develop an ability to see infrared, and they believe that that's a factor that will enhance it. My understanding, based on simply testimony to that, is that it may be making something of a difference in that way already. But what is it doing to someone's vision to play with one's eyes? Will it hurt? Will it degrade the ability to see going forward? We don't know. Long-term studies are needed in order to know what we don't know. So whether it's an RFID implant or eating a stick of butter every day for breakfast or giving yourself vitamin A2, we just don't know where it's going to lead. On the other hand, there are things that seem relatively benign. This is Northpaw. Many of you are familiar with that. Northpaw, sensebridge.net project/Northpaw is where you learn more about it. It's magnets and a buzzer. And it comes from the studies done by people at the University of Wisconsin a number of years ago, called the FeelSense belt, where magnets were implanted and then directly connected to neuronal systems that hijack the pathways developed by our evolution in the brain for something else to take the detection of the Earth's magnetic field directly into the brain. And the person who volunteered for that experiment developed for 6 months a very acute ability to know always where true north was. It seemed astonishing at the time to emulate what pigeons and the like could do, but now Northpaw makes this available, and there are other kinds of things you can wear to detect the Earth's magnetic field, and the buzzers enable you to learn over time by training your brain what it is that you're picking up. And I wanted to say something about that briefly, because you cannot overemphasize the degree of cooperation you have to give to your brain, almost as if it is a partner in this. You know, in light of color blindness, that many women, about 20%, have an additional chromosome which enhances their ability to see more colors than normals can see. But one woman in particular, when she discovered that she had this ability and told people about it, was told she was imagining it and it couldn't be true. What happens when people tell us that, even when it's innately available to us by genetics, people stop believing that they have the capacity, just as the only way you can really take personal power away from someone is convince them they don't have it, so they don't exercise it. That's what abuse is and does. But intrinsic to the human condition is freedom to act and the power to act. And if intrinsic to your genetic code is the ability to see more colors than anyone else can see, and you know it and believe it, and then cooperate with what you have been given to develop it, then you enhance, by virtue of your choice and freedom and own intentionality, your ability to see those colors more and more clearly and more distinctly, and to use what now is a gift rather than an imaginative something you made up. So it's important to know that when you do put these things, whatever they may be, whether genetically or enhancements, onto or into yourself, that if your brain can pick it up, you have an obligation based on your prefrontal cortex, which is your executive function, to work with that part of the brain that is doing it, so that you will enhance your ability to continue to do it. So Northpaw is a good thing if you want to know where the magnetic field is. fMRIs have been used for neurofeedback for chronic pain patients, and they learn they can train themselves not to need opiates anymore using that feedback mechanism. And OpenBCI, which we've had great presentations on here at the conference, electroencephalography, neurofeedback, can allow you to control or enable alpha wave meditation states much more easily, and that's a safe way to use it. But you can also use that feedback loop to reward thought patterns which are nefarious or negative for yourself and can have serious psychological impacts. So the same thing can be used positively or negatively. The location that you stimulate in the brain when you're using things like transcranial direct stimulation, TDCS, using just some circuitry and saline soaked pads and a battery, it's all it takes. Some people found they had to withdraw from the use of that technology as they did from a drug. And the location to stimulate is critical. But we don't know yet what we are stimulating. We are stimulating something in the brain, but we don't really know what. So the risk can be said as, it's easy to fool yourself as a human and believe what we want to believe, but these issues are much more complex than we thought. Now, different places allow us to do different things. Neuromancer style, you can go to Chiba City near Tokyo and get McCoy poly, also, aka the flat line, inserted into your head in a chip. But before you do that, you have to find out what's legal. And if what you are doing is not legal, then you have to weigh the consequences of trying something that results in something negative. Excuse me. Synthetic biology has obvious risks and benefits. And different cultures recognize that differently. In Europe, you need a transformation license to do even simple, risk-free lab experiments. In North America, the regulations are much more permissive. So there's a societal advantage in advancing the state of education and allowing informed discussions about genetic engineering. The previous speaker did not want to get into politics, and especially religious politics, but I'm going to go back to a great scientist hundreds of years ago who, when the church told him he shouldn't dissect cadavers, which he wanted to do in order to discover human anatomy, in order to do medicine, he said anything that deserves to exist deserves to be known. And the same is true, of course, of stem cell research and all the other things that rigid, frightened, rigidly righteous people try on behalf of what they believe is the general good to keep all of us from doing for the benefit of all of us. I don't think it's much of a limb to go out and say that rigidly righteous people, I learned in the ministry, are the worst problem for ministers and clergy, because they present a schema that's inviolable, that's absolute, that's totalitarian, out of their fear-based need to control. So, different cultures will manifest that different ways politically. And then there's what other cultures do with this data. Beijing is doing human genetic enhancement. We've had two problems with that. One is they're doing things that we would never allow to be done here. Never. On the other hand, they lie a lot. So we don't know exactly what's real. They claim that the Beijing Genomics Institute is learning about the genetics of intelligence. So when we say Genomics Institute, think whole cities dedicated to that task and consisting of nothing but people who are doing that task. So they claim that within 5 years they'll be able to engineer babies with an IQ of 300. They say there are about 100 different genetic factors they've been able to recognize, and by doing genetic engineering appropriately, we can enhance IQs up to 300, some claim 400, 450. In North America, we have a moratorium proposed on germline modification. So will our unenhanced humans here, the next generation, remain competitive if the Chinese in fact do that? My best sources in the intelligence community tell me they will not achieve that. That they may very well, within maybe 10 years, be able to enhance intelligence by genetic engineering, but they will also develop, and I won't go into the details, but they will also develop cancers that will mean they were dead on the table by the time they are in late adolescence. So think of Roy, the replicant, asking Tyrell in Blade Runner for the changes he wanted made to his genetic structure so that he could have more life. And he said, gives rise to the recombinant DNA gives rise to a mutation. The patient is dead before they can get off the table. It's like that. If you are in a culture and a political context that is willing to sacrifice individuals in order to find out how to do that best, and who discards the byproducts of failed experiments, you will learn faster, but at a cost that in our culture we don't believe is an acceptable cost. So they say these 100 genes most relevant, if they all point in the right direction, will lead to another generation of Chinese 3 times smarter than us. They don't have any moratorium on that research, but they also have to wait a generation to see if it's true. Intelligence is a very difficult thing. We use the word as if we all share an understanding of what that means, but it means many different things. And again, my resources tell me that 100 is probably light in terms of all of the factors in the brain and in the genome that affect it. So you want to do your homework when you hear these claims. You want to do your homework when advertising and marketing presents products and processes that claim to do astonishing things simply. If it seems too good to be true, this is an old man speaking. It usually is. This is a gentleman we heard yesterday, Ariel, who injected chlorophyll eye drops in an attempt to enhance his night vision, to enhance his ability to see, in effect, in infrared. That's how he looks with chlorophyll-enhanced eyes, pretty green. The question it raises is, what else are you doing to your eyes? Above all, do you know what you are doing to your eyes? So there are things we can experiment with, but we don't know what the results are going to be. Here's a slide showing you 2 monkeys that are going to undergo a head transplant. We are doing, that is, we humans are now doing in some places, head transplants. You take the head of one monkey and you put it on the other. A doctor in Italy claimed that within 2 years he'll be able to do this for human beings. I think it raises some questions for us. There is a mouse ready to undergo a head transplant. He's obviously been sedated. No animals were hurt during the process of this operation, except, of course, the mouse from who the head was donated, and that's what he looks like afterward. You see a white mouse with the head of a black mouse. Now, here's something amazing. using equivalent of fMRI.